Early on January 22nd, Met Service issued a rare red heavy rain warning for the region. At the base of the mountain, a stream of thick, turbid water began flowing aggressively out from the foot of the slope. Inside the Mount Maunganui beachside holiday park, the signs escalated. At 4:30 a.m., camper Lisa McLennan and her partner woke to the sound of debris hitting the back of their camper van as smaller slips began to fail above the site. They frantically called the holiday park at 4:43 a.m. to raise the alarm. The call went through to a security guard who explained no one was actually on site to manage the desk. The mountain was exhibiting immediate signs of collapse, but because the council had no framework to monitor the site or act on those signals, the people sleeping at its base were left entirely undefended. At 9:30 a.m., the slope finally gave way. A massive slip crashed into the campground, killing 6 people at the holiday park and 2 nearby. Disasters on this scale are often framed by institutions as unforeseeable anomalies, unpredictable acts of God that no amount of planning could have prevented. However, the investigation launched in the wake of the tragedy suggests a different reality. It points toward a systemic failure within the organization, where warnings were received, were quickly filed away, and ultimately ignored. The documented history of those warnings begins in 1999. A report by Dr. Laurie Richards stated explicitly that placing sleeping occupants at the foot of the slope was imprudent and characterized the risk as high. These warnings repeated for decades. By 2023 and again in 2025, geotechnical experts were begging the council to implement a Trigger Action Response Plan, known as a TARP. This chart shows the TARP logic. It uses rain forecasts and physical signs like muddy water as automatic triggers to clear the area. If this plan had been in place, an evacuation would have likely occurred well before the landslide hit. The council actually employed a highly qualified natural hazard specialist to assess these risks, but his role was restricted to an advisory capacity. He had no power to carry recommendations forward. The specialist later testified that he was kept entirely unaware of the 2023 and 2025 reports identifying the landslide risk at the campground. He only saw them after the fatalities occurred. These siloed departments functioned as a bureaucratic vacuum. They effectively absorbed and neutralized modern geotechnical science, preventing critical safety data from ever triggering a response. To understand why these warnings were silenced, you have to look at the land itself. To the local Maori, the Tongapawenwa, Mauau is a sacred tupuna, a living ancestor that anchors their identity and history. In 2013, the council and iwi established a co-governance model for the Mauau historic. It was hailed as a national gold standard for sharing power and stewardship over sacred land, but the holiday park sits just outside the reserve boundary. This invisible legal line meant the campground remained under the sole management and administration of the city council. The council used this administrative boundary to hoard risk information. While experts were identifying fatal hazards on the slope, the council kept its treaty partners locked out of the loop regarding the data. This legal division allowed the council to maintain the appearance of progressive co-governance while creating a fatal blind spot that betrayed both the iwi partners and the campers. The review by retired Judge Paul Davison concluded that the landslide was not a hidden hazard. He described the failure to evacuate the campers as deeply systemic. However, despite 27 years of missed opportunities, the report found that no single individual was legally accountable. It concluded that no one had done anything intentionally or deliberately wrong. In the aftermath, the mayor apologized on behalf of the organization, but the chief executive refused to resign, insisting he was the best person to lead the council through the implementation of the new safety measures. Promises of lessons learned are functionally empty when the systems of power remain unchanged and the architects of the failure face no individual consequences. This tragedy highlights a conflict between two worldviews, a bureaucracy that treats a sacred mountain as a liability to be managed, and an indigenous reality that recognizes it as a living entity. Authentic public safety requires more than technical reports. It requires tearing down bureaucratic silos and genuinely sharing power over the land. When the land, modern science, and the community all provide the same warning, institutions must hit unmute and listen. If they don't, the cost is measured in lives.